Welcome, everyone. Hola tothom. Thank you very much for joining us. I am very excited to host this event today with Pablo Hasel and Valtonyc. And I want to thank, first of all, them for sharing their stories with us, and especially you, Pablo. Thank you for taking time to talk to us today in what might be your last days of freedom. I want also to thank Isabel Val, a lawyer, for joining us. She will help us understand better how the cases of Pablo and Josep are part of a wider trend of deterioration of the right of freedom of expression in Spain. I will only make a very short introduction to the topic before we give the floor to our very special guests, Pablo and Josep, who will be followed by Isabel. Afterwards, the participants will have a chance to briefly share their views or ask questions. So Pablo Hasel and Valtonyc have both been convicted of crimes of insults against the crown and glorification of terrorism for the content of their songs. And in the case of Pablo, also for the content of tweets. Now, I am not going to sugarcoat it. Some of Pablo's and Josep's lyrics are harsh. Some may feel insulting to some people. Some are insulting to specific authorities, like the King of Spain. And some may be considered offensive or even disgusting by many people. Perhaps they will have a chance to talk about this. They probably take what others think is offensive language to use it as a tool to denounce social injustice more effectively. In fact, I'm not especially fond of these expressions, and that's precisely why I wanted to host this session, because I think that the freedom of expression is precisely the freedom of every one of us to express whatever we feel it's necessary for our communication. And I don't think a song will ever be criminal. The problem is that Spanish criminal code contains a series of crimes defined in very broad and vague terms, which are being used to prosecute artistic performances, actions of protest, and social media messages that should be protected in a democracy that claims to respect the freedom of expression. Perhaps the most striking of these examples are precisely this crime of glorification of terrorism and the crime of insults against the crown. But these are not the only ones. In a report of Amnesty International tweet, "If you dare, how counter-terrorism law restrict freedom of expression in Spain," Amnesty denounces that the crime of glorification of terrorism is being used widely by authorities to target political speech, particularly on social media and the creative community in Spain. And this is resulting in self-censorship and a broader chilling effect on the freedom of expression of Spain. When it comes to the crime of insulting against the crown, it has been established consistently by international human rights courts that public officials, and in particular the heads of state, should be subject to much more harsh insulting and criticism as part of the political debate. In fact, Spain has been condemned twice by European Court of Human Rights for its sentences on insults against the crown. But the Spanish authorities and courts remain relentless, having a king that had to flee for his alleged corruption doesn't seem to be putting a stop to that. Perhaps, given this context, it will not surprise you that as much as according to Free News, Spain in 2019 is the country with most artists with prison sentences across the world. We're talking that Spain is ahead of Iran, Turkey, and Burma, with 14 people imprisoned for artistic expressions. Anyway, with that, I would like to give the floor to our first guest, Pablo. Thank you very much. Hola, Pablo. Moltes gràcies per ser avui.
Thank you so much for being here with us. You have the floor. My name is Pablo Hasel. I'm a rapper and a poet from Lleida, city in Catalonia. In the year 2011, I was arrested for my first time and frisked at my home. I was living with my family, and the Spanish police authorities took many notebooks, cameras, T-shirts, and books, even books, just because I had books about communism. They took them away from me, accusing me of what they call glorification of terrorism because of several songs that I had written. Not only did they take my own objects, computers, but also some belonging to my parents and siblings. I spent one night in custody, and then I was released pending trial. They were asking for 2 years of prison because of the content of my songs. In 2014, I was tried and convicted to the maximum penalty that they were pursuing. So that was my background, criminal background, 2 years of prison, but I did not go to prison because of time elapsed, and therefore it was shorter than 2 years and I didn't have to go. 2 years after that, in 2016, 2017, there was a new investigation underway because of, once again, the content of my songs, as well as several tweets that I had posted, where I was denouncing the actions of the Crown, police abuse. I was showing solidarity with political prisoners, and they accused me of 3 crimes. Once again, glorification of terrorism, insults to the Crown, and insults to police forces. So they're asking for 2 years and 9 months of prison for me. And then in 2018, the trial took place and I was convicted to 9 months in prison plus a sanction of nearly 30,000 euros. I'm not going to pay for that. I do not want to show any obedience, and this involves longer months in jail. So all in all, this adds to 2 years and several months in prison. So in a matter of days, I'm going to be imprisoned because of this last court ruling. We are waiting to see whether they will force me to also remain in prison for 2 years because of my former court ruling, and I could spend 4 years in prison just because of my songs and tweets. Now, during the trials, we have proved things such as everything that I told about the Crown is now fully demonstrated, and there's ample evidence in international media and national media as well that the torture and police killings that I spoke about have also been reported in many media, as well as the European Human Rights Court, as Clara already said, has condemned the Spanish state on several occasions because of those tortures and even because of a certain killing. So even if it was proved that what I was telling was true, and they have even failed to comply with their own prison regulations, and some people have been deprived of healthcare service, in the case of Isabel Aparicio. So regardless of the fact that all of this has been proven, this wasn't enough to be acquitted. So the national audience, which has a lot of Francoist fascist backgrounds, and what they stage is just fake trials. Even if we try to defend ourselves and give evidence to the fact, we end up being convicted anyway, because the goal of those court rulings are to curtail freedom of expression and to use some of us as scapegoats. And they do that so that the rest of the population is afraid when criticizing the Crown or any police action or showing solidarity with political prisoners. That's the main goal of their action here. And I would like to finish this section by insisting on what our colleague Clara already said. the Spanish state, just a couple years, was the country with the highest number of artists being sent to prison, which is a very telling piece of data. It comes to show that in the Spanish state, there's no freedom of expression. It is only held by fascists to say whatever nonsense comes to their head, and also to find if you want to find a country where the same thing happens, you have to go to Turkey or Morocco, because in Europe, in most of Europe, not even in the United States, rappers are ever imprisoned for the content of their songs, even if they're more explicit than others. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pablo. We now give the floor to Josep Arenas Valtonyc. You have the floor, Josep. We can't hear Josep. He seems to be muted. Apologies. Can you hear me now? Thank you very much, Clara, for having organized this meeting, and thanks to your team for inviting us to do what we cannot do in Spain, which is free speech. I am Josep Miquel. In the rap scene, I'm called Valtonyc, and I was convicted to 3.5 years of imprisonment when I was 18. They wanted to send me to a prison 500 kilometers away from my home, and isolated, as if I was a terrorist, as if rapping turns you into a terrorist. A terrorist is someone who rules through fear. That's more or less what the Spanish government does. So to realize that Spain is a dictatorship and freedom does not exist there, you only have to look to our convictions. And we have to resort to countries like Turkey, like China, or Eastern countries. We are convicted of glorification of terrorism, insulting the crown, and we only express ourselves, our ideas freely through songs, and that's really shameful, especially when this glorification of terrorism charge has increased. We don't have grapple anymore, ETA does not exist anymore. These trials on the charges of glorification of terrorism have increased fivefold since the end of ETA, which is in 2011. Since 2011, we're seeing more trials on the charges of glorification of terrorism. And of course, back in the 80s and the 90s, and even in the 2000s, we had punk bands and rock bands that talked in their lyrics about ETA. This comes to show that the Spanish state needs an enemy that talks about terrorism, so that they can justify their repression using this term terrorism. And that's how they demobilize social movements and people who are committed, whose interest is only social justice, which is absent in Spain. I was 17 when ETA was disarmed and disappeared, and I was 2 when the last Grapple terror attack took place. So I cannot be liable for that. I've been convicted as if I was a terrorist. But the Spanish state, for example, doesn't want to talk that in 2020, 45 women lost their lives to the hands of their partner, men, or there is no crime to convict macho lyrics. And if I'm not mistaken, there's a show, Big Brother, that broadcasted live a rape that took place in the show, and nobody has convicted anyone. The criminal code is not applied either to racist statements, xenophobic statements, and they use, for example, in the criminal code, the hate crime. Of course, they do not apply the hate crime to law enforcement agencies or prosecutors or judges. It is only applied to these people who are risking social exclusion, like homosexuals, women, Jews, racial minorities. Those are the victims of racism, and the Spanish state does not defend them. You can criticize these people, you can speak out against them, and nothing will happen to you. And we are accused of inciting people to kill or to die in our songs. That's not true. We just do our songs. We are artists. We do not threaten anyone. It's as absurd as saying that Nabokov is a pedophile because he wrote Lolita, or Bukowski is a rapist because in his books there's a rape on every page. I love reading Bukowski. And there are rapes all the time, all kinds of crimes. And probably had he written this book today in Spain and not in the US, he would be in jail. So Spanish judges are sending out the message that the Spanish society is not democratically mature enough to tell apart reality from a song. Come on, this is the 21st century. There are very violent video games that are played by children. Children listen to very violent songs. Even Esperanza Aguirre from the Popular Party, the right-wing party, said something against architects. She said we should kill them because we would need the death penalty against architects, because I don't like them at all, because their crimes outlive them. Let's say that in that case, Esperanza Aguirre, the Popular Party, and the Spanish judges, well, this is like a mockery, like a joke. But apparently, in the rap scene, we cannot mock, we cannot crack jokes. This comes to show that free speech in Spain is only for the right wing, not for the left wing. You can threaten Puigdemont from a tank, you can go to right-wing radio shows, you can say that people have to be killed, as that gang from the army said out loud, or you can even fire with a fire squad a figure showing Puigdemont's face. Nothing will happen to you. But I guess that this is only a context. And talking about the context, well, the rap context comes from the Afro-American rage, the repression that they live in the US. And I want to send my greetings to the Black community and all their struggles, Black Lives Matter movement, because in the US, Afro-Americans die every year, killed by the police. In 2020, over 15 Black people were killed by the police. And of course, George Floyd's case was the high-profile case, but there are many more. And that's what we do in rap. If we talk about violence in rap, we're talking about Black people being killed by the police. And I was a rapper, I was 18, for example. They should talk about the Tarajal migrants being killed by the Guardia Civil. And the Guardia Civil were never imprisoned or convicted. For example, Billy El Nino torture, that was the favorite torturer of the Franco dictatorship. And today he's being paid homages on a daily basis by the Spanish state and the occupation forces. That's the true democracy of Spain. If my lyrics or Pablo Hasel's lyrics are violent, have you ever read other lyrics? For example, someone who says that the blood of the impure will water the field, or they talk about putting their enemies in coffins. Well, that has to be taken in a context. Music is full of metaphors, of references to violence, and insulting the crown. Well, I think that the king himself is an insult to the crown because he's unable to take on his responsibility. He fled to Abu Dhabi and he has not gone to the courts. And we are treated like criminals. Regional Minister Ponsatí is treated as someone who has fled because they organized a referendum. But the king is now treated as a person who is in exile. And I think that this crime of insults to the crown, I think that to put an end to that, let's put an end to the crown. Let's put an end to this gang of thieves. I can say that from Belgium. I cannot say this in Spain, but I'm now in this free European space. I'm a European citizen and entitled to free speech. I want to say out loud that the monarchy in Spain are thieves. I didn't say that. This was said in 1797. It was a habit. Valle Inclán said about Alphonse XIII, that he was expelled because he was a thief. But even a Spanish judge, José Castro, said that in a sentence, that the monarchy, the Bourbon family, were thieves. He said Cristina de Bourbon stole from my family because they took the public money from the Balearic Islands government and the Valencia government for the Olympic candidacy. Is this a crime to speak out about these? My songs are followed on YouTube. They do not infringe any YouTube laws, any restriction. They only seem to infringe Spanish laws. I'm free in Belgium when the state issued a warrant on me to achieve the direct extradition, on the charges of terrorism, because this is totally misusing terrorism, the term. I don't want to imagine what the Belgian judges heard when they received this warrant on charges of terrorism for a singer, and they had a terror attack in Brussels in the metro, and I've been financed a CD. Belgium paid the production of a CD that I produced, and I've been able to keep making music and publishing my songs. That's the difference between a European 21st century democracy and a 19th century dictatorship. Democracies support people to speak out loud. Spain imprisons artists. As Pablo said, Spain ranks first as the country in which more artists are in jail. Repression should never be used against what we don't like. There are other tools to protest legally. If there are unpleasant songs, well, that's up to the citizens to decide. The state shouldn't have a say. Politicians, bankers, judges, they do have their institutions to defend them. They have power, and their lives do not depend on our opinions. On the contrary, our lives depend on their actions. If we don't have free speech, we're left with nothing. And that's what is happening to us. We don't have free speech, and that's why we speak out, and they will not stop this. And we have on our side people like Javier Bardem or Laura Flores who have called out to release Pablo Hasel. But apparently this is not of interest to Spain. Thank you very much, Josep. Thank you very much for this statement. And now, Isabel Elval, are you with us, Isabel? Yes, here I am. Thank you. Thank you.
She will put a little bit of context to these cases that are part of a more general trend, but I think that the previous speeches have been extremely eloquent in showing what's really going on. Thank you, Isabel. The floor is yours.
Buenos días. Gracias por invitarme a participar.
Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this meeting. What these two young men just told us is a nice example of the situation that we are in Spain right now. We have to understand that the freedom of expression must protect all kinds of artistic expressions, ideas, thoughts, disturbing as they may be. Freedom of expression as a right, as a public freedom, is enshrined by institutions. It is a basic pillar of democracy, and it is not there to defend only opinions that benefit our environment or that are favorable to society, that are politically correct. The right to freedom of expression protects all kinds of expressions, even those that can be considered disgusting or ill-natured, that can call the powers that be into question, but that question this peacefully. This is what this fundamental right to freedom of expression means. Obviously, in a nutshell, I just summarized it. And it is protected and enshrined in international treaties that Spain has signed, such as the Pact of Basic Rights and Freedoms in New York, the European Convention of Human Rights, the Universal Human Rights Declaration, the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. However, we are witnessing for some years now, just to give you a context, since 2014, we have been witnessing an all-out persecution by police forces and law enforcement courses that raid social networks obviously with a very broad use, where citizens express themselves and they keep tracing and tracking opinions and ideas that could be considered dangerous. And they do that by using software that selects specific keywords that the police forces select. So we need to understand that ever since 2007, approximately, the terrorist armed group, the ETA, announced that they were seizing any kind of criminal activity. There was a ceasefire that year. So ever since that year, and hopefully forever, this terrorist group ETA is no longer a problem for peaceful coexistence in Spain. And the same thing goes for Grapo, a terrorist group that was dismantled and therefore dissolved. So against this backdrop, you might think it's interesting that when these organized terrorist organizations are no longer active and do not pose any threat in Spain, then we start seeing how these new crimes based on public opinions and persecuted by either the police forces or the courts in a very intense manner keep propping up, and there are more and more inadmissible violations of these fundamental rights, that is freedom of expression. We have a long list of examples. These two people that came to this meeting to tell us their experience are the perfect example of what's happening in Spain. It started about 7 years ago, but it's still the case. So with this violation of public powers in the peaceful development of this fundamental right to freedom of expression, we are witnessing what we call a discouraging effect. And it's something that democratic societies should tend to avoid, because if people are discouraged, they start censoring themselves. And what is seriously damaged is the democratic system itself, which is a fundamental pillar of any state boasting to be a democratic country. Now, these two people agree, as do many more that have been tried and convicted. They agree that they've been persecuted for two crimes that share some characteristics. They have something in common that can be a cause for worry, which is that the power to persecute, to try these crimes, is held by the National Audience and Audiencia Nacional, which is one of the highest courts in Spain. And the last say regarding court rulings published by the National Audience resides in the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the ordinary course of action in Spain. It's the highest court. So these two courts, against the highest in Spain, are the ones that need to hear these cases: insults to the crown or to the king, and glorification of terrorism. In Spain, the king has been considered a person that is to be inviolable. It is sacrosanct, and this has been expressed in many court rulings by the courts that have ruled on this particular crime. So considering the king from the point of view of the criminal code is that he is protected. He has bolstered protection vis-a-vis any other institution or lay citizen. So we need to understand that the king has the highest power in Spain. He is the highest representative in the international sphere. He is a moderator and an arbiter, and therefore he is the symbol of the state according to Article 56 of the Spanish Constitution. So if we bear in mind all this power that he holds, we also add to that this is inherited, that this is not a power that has been granted to him because citizens elected him. And it's his an institution that was reinstated by the Spanish dictator from his bed when he was dying. There was no popular referendum about the form of government that was to be reinstated in Spain during the democratic transition. If the king is untouchable, if the king is fully protected through all of these means, he holds a near absolute power, or even an absolute power. So just like the European Court of Human Rights tells us, the higher the power that a person holds, well, a more ample margin should they have in terms of receiving criticism. They should be more openly criticized. But if people are sent to jail whenever they criticize this overarching and very powerful institution, we are in a very singular situation, and it is alien to any democracy. It is not something that democracies stand for. Therefore, the king holds an absolute power within a democracy, and it's an oxymoron. I'm not sure if it's even possible in any democratic state for this to happen. Now, these two people also described a repression of a criminal nature because they composed lyrics in their rap songs. Now, these lyrics have been considered as glorifying of terrorism. So they are considered as a crime, a glorification of terrorism, which has a criminal nature in Spain, and it is punished with 1 to 3 years of prison time. However, the penalty that is applied when this crime is committed through the internet is increased to 2 years and 1 day, ranging from 2 years to 3 days, 3 years in prison time. So in most cases, this penalty would involve sending that person to jail because it's longer than 2 years. Now, against this backdrop, in which neither ETA nor GRAPO nor any other terrorist organization is an active threat to Spain, from the point of view of what rap songs mean, and also from the point of view of a lay citizen that is interacting in social networking sites and issue an opinion, sometimes ad-libbing it, sometimes without taking in mind higher consequences, considering as glorifying of terrorism just a set of lyrics or tweets that have been posted in a social network represents quite a violation against this fundamental right of artistic creation and freedom of expression, because criminal charges should only be applied as a minimum intervention unless there's no other way. That's when criminal codes are applied. So we are talking about judges, mostly making up the national audience and the Supreme Court, that are confusing these lyrics that might be exacerbated, which are quite common in rap songs. They consider them as reality. They are when they are fiction, obviously, and they cannot tell them apart. So that fiction that rap songs represent are being misinterpreted. So from the point of view of Spanish courts, we believe that there's a violation of Article 6 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, therefore instilling legal insecurity. Citizens no longer know what to do, and there's a violation of their right in as long as Article 45 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, because depending on which territory you reside, you might be sent to jail or not. He lives in Belgium, Valtonyc, therefore he's not going to jail. Pablo Hasel is living in Spain, and therefore his freedom is at risk. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Thank you for this very enlightening discussion. discussion. Now it's turn to give the floor if some of the participants, MEPs, want to speak. Diana, do you want to speak? Com funciona això?
Hola, bon dia.
Hola, Diana.
Sí, sí, perdoneu que no
Hello,
trobava.
good morning. Sorry, I was just trying to activate sound. Good morning, everyone. Well, first and foremost, thank you, Clara, for organizing this.
We've committed to finish by one, so all MEPs are very well trained at very quick speeches, so stay within the MEP 1-2 minute. Okay, thanks.
Perfecte. Bueno, només...
Okay, great. So I was saying thank you, Clara, for organizing this event, for shedding light and helping us render this more visible to other colleagues in Europe. In this case, this charge against this attack against artistic creation, it is quite common in Spain, and it's important to have some well-known faces, in this case, Valtonyc and Pablo. Thank you as well for participating in this event. I believe that you are extremely necessary to help us move forward. You have explained the situation very well, even from the criminal point of view and what Spain is going through, but this is a European matter. So we will obviously take this to European courts as much as possible. We, the Commission of Culture, we also reflect upon this artistic freedom of expression and the consequences that this has in the artistic scene in Europe, because when we have very specific cases that democracy and the freedom of artistic expression is not justified, in this fields of action, people take steps backwards. So we need to keep working together so that every citizen, but specifically artists, can express their ideas freely. And hopefully that they don't censor themselves because of they might fear that they might go to jail or be sent to exile. So we hope that together we'll be able to change the situation soon. Thank you, Diana. Fernando?
Let's see, I think I need to unmute you. Sorry about that. Father now. Now, can you unmute Fernando, please? ¿Qué pasa?
Sí, però no està agafant la paraula.
Home, és que està muteat.
They should start speaking. Are they muted?
No està agafant la paraula. L'estic desmutejant i no està agafant la paraula.
Ok. Bueno,
sí, a ver, ahora.
Ahora, ok.
Sí.
Now, yes.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Pues gracias, Clara, por la organización de este webinar,
Clara,
y por invitarnos. Y un saludo a todos los panelistas y especialmente a Pablo Hasel y a Valtonyc, que simplemente quería manifestar nuestra solidaridad en un claro ataque a la libertad de expresión, que, bueno, pues, como ya se ha dicho, equipara a España con países donde la reputación democrática pues, es más peligrosa, como Marruecos o Turquía, ¿no? Desgraciadamente, en nuestro caso no estamos hablando
unfortunately, in our case, it's not that we heard about it. This violation of rights has been quite common in the Basque Country as well. And there's this agreement of how many rights are being violated in terms of freedom of expression, rendering some ideas illegal, even restricting the right to elect, to voting. You Catalans know about this as well. I think it's one of the characteristics of the Spanish state today and how it envisioned democracy. Valtonyc mentioned this as well. Considering lyrics as glorifying of terrorism when ETA was dismantled years ago, I think it's a clear indication that the Spanish state needs to find internal enemies, domestic enemies all the time, because this helps them create a framework, a media frame, knowing that we have people to fight, and therefore this justifies specific actions from them. The national audience keeps convicting young Basque men for terrorist charges. This very week, a couple of them were convicted when ETA as a terrorist band is or group is no longer active. So once again, this specter of terrorism is waived as an excuse to persecute some given ideas. So I believe that it is no longer about ideologies anymore. At the European Parliament, we've been there for a year and a half, and I was surprised by the fact that there are some MPs that are part of conservative groups, but still they know these values, these political values, very clear: freedom of expression, political rights, and even the right of peoples to self-determination, which is very clear in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, or all treaties that make up the international law. So in order to finish, I would like to say that Spain has a very serious problem, which is this low democratic quality, and it is not dependent on a specific political party. It doesn't matter who is in power. This is a shortcoming that is common to the system itself. So that's it. Once again, we support Pablo Hasel and Valtonyc. We wish them the best, and we are here to help them in any kind of initiative that exists. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Fernando.
Wants to take the floor? Ivan, do you want to speak? Or, if any of the attendees would like to ask a question or take the floor, please raise your hand. Mark?
Hi.
Hello, Mark.
Hello. Nice to see you all. Thank you for organizing this event. As a non-Basque or non-Catalan, non-Spanish politician, of course, we are all aware of the situation of political prisoners and of the exiles who live here in Belgium among us. But what many people don't know is what we've heard today. That means that, numerous citizens are in some way or another victim of the repressive judicial system in Spain, which is clearly politicized. Teachers, artists, mayors, protesters, thousands of them altogether. And whenever I, as a member of the Senate, when we have interparliamentary discussions and we have the occasion to ask questions to, for instance, Didier Reynders, the commissioner, the European Commissioner, he would always take his speaking note and he would always say, yeah, but this is an internal affair of Spain and we have all the confidence in the Spanish judiciary. This is always the answer we get. Well, let me point out that earlier this month, there was a very important ruling of the Belgian Court of Appeal in the case of the possible extradition of one of our exiles who live in Belgium. And the court clearly says the right to a fair trial in Spain is not guaranteed. Let this sink in for a minute. The right to a fair trial is not guaranteed. That means clearly that the court says that Spain does not act according to the European way of life. Now, being questioned about that, our Prime Minister in Parliament, in Belgian Parliament, our Prime Minister, Alexander De Croo, and I think it is the first time a Prime Minister does that, in his answer, he said, yes, I've read the ruling, and he mentioned in one sentence, in one answer, Spain on the same level as Hungary and Poland. This is important. Let's make sure that all of our politicians in all EU member states and in the European Commission get this, that it sinks in by them as well, and that they keep that in mind.
Thank you very much, Mark. Is there any other request to speak? Bodil?
Yes.
Go ahead. Bon dia.
Thank you, Clara, for inviting us. Bon dia. Gracias, Clara, por invitar-nos avui.
Thank you, Clara, for the invitation. I wanted to attend this meeting to be updated about what is going on, because I am from Sweden and everything that is happening here is absurd. And I've written on the Swedish media very often about the Catalan politicians' process, but also about artists. And I would like to encourage our artists who are here with us today, just let them know that I will keep writing on the Swedish press and media so that Swedes know what is going on in Spain, because it's really harsh that this is happening in a European context. Thank you very much, Bodil. I think no one else would like to take the floor, so I believe we will open the floor to the journalists, to the press. I don't know if there are questions. Natalia, if you could lend me a hand here, because I don't know how to go about it. Arnau will be doing it. Okay, Arnau, the floor is yours. Andres, the floor is yours. Hello, thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. I'd like to ask Pablo Hasel whether it has crossed his mind to leave Spain, to go to exile before he is imprisoned. And then which messages, which communication have you received from the current Spanish government about his situation, whether you had any expectation in that regard? Well, as for exile, well, I totally respect that decision. I thought about it. But in my case, and each case is different, I decided to stay here because I thought that my message would be more powerful if I stayed, because that's the message that the state wants to silence. And by staying, I would unmask the state and remove this democracy or democratic washing that they are trying to apply. And there is no democracy whatsoever in Spain. And this was confirmed to me when I was allowed to go to Belgium and Venezuela. These are two states in which I could be in exile, but I was allowed to leave after my first conviction when supposedly I was not to leave the country. And now I have more convictions and more charges, and I was allowed to leave the country. So it was clear to me that if I left, it was one less problem for them. As for the government, well, no support has been shown to me by the government. The government is just an accomplice in this imprisonment and therefore guilty, because I will not ask for a pardon. I will not beg for my freedom. I will not regret anything. There's nothing to be regretted. But of course, they do have the power to release me. And in that sense, they haven't done a thing, just like they haven't done a thing to overrule the criminal code that is convicting us, or to overrule the gag law, as they announced previously on different occasions. But rather, they have broadened the gag law with the known digital gag law. So they are far away from putting an end to repression. So I'm not surprised by the reaction of this wrongly called progressive government. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Arnau?
La Jasmina sembla que no contesta.
Well, Jasmina is not answering. So, Robert, you've got the floor. Robert, good morning. Thank you very much for this explanation and this event. This is a question for Pablo. Which prison have you been assigned, and how many days do you have left before going to prison? Well, Friday next week is my last day. Of course, I will not go on my own to the prison because it's an unfair conviction, an unfair sentence, it's a matter of dignity. I will not walk to the prison. They will have to come and kidnap me wherever I am, which will probably be my home. I don't know how much prison time I will do, because there are, with political prisoners, what they do is they send you to any other prison far away. And the solidarity movement, if I'm imprisoned and sent away, the most immediate claim apart from my release will be for me to be sent back to the prison in my city, Lleida. Another question for Pablo too. If you don't have a clear sentence yet, that might vary and change. Is there any step being skipped here? So you will go to jail without knowing how much prison time you'll be doing. Well, that's what my lawyer is looking into. In my convictions, there are different faults. For example, one of the judges was not legally in a legal position, and very often I have heard about the conviction through the press. So they are playing around with this uncertainty, not only the uncertainty that I have experienced in the last years, knowing that I could be imprisoned at any time, but now I don't know where I'm being sent, which prison I'm being sent to, and for how long. I think that's part of their strategy, to try and break me and wear me down and add more insult to injury in a way. Pablo, one last question. Thank you, Pablo. And one last question for Valtonyc. Good morning, Josep. I'd like to know which are your plans for the near future and whether you picture yourself in Belgium for good. Well, the near future, well, the next step is that the Belgian Constitutional Court will rule whether they extradite me or not. But let's remember that there is first and second instance in Belgium. First and second instance court said that producing a song or creating a song is not terrorism. So hopefully the Belgian Constitutional Court will go down the same path that the other courts decided to. And as far as I know, in the Belgian constitution, there is free speech enshrined, and well, that's as far as I know. Do I picture myself in Belgium for good? I don't know what I'm having for lunch tomorrow, so I don't know. There are many people who leave Spain to go and study abroad or work abroad, and they end up living in that foreign country. I cannot give you an answer, but of course I would like to go back home one day, maybe not to Mallorca or to a Catalan Republic, which would resemble home very much.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yasmina from Muse. I'm really thankful for everything that has been shared so far, and Free Muse has been following situation. We are really concerned about the implication of anti-terror law in Spain. And my question would be a bit about the broader context and how much we should be concerned about the impact Pablo's sentence has on other rappers and other musicians in Spain, and in particular the members of the band La Insurgencia. I'm sorry, my Spanish is very bad. Should we be concerned that in case that they produce any other song that is deemed supportive of terrorism, that they could face additional consequences and apparently at the end even be imprisoned because they were sentenced to these suspended sentences? Thank you very much.
Isabel, do you want to answer this question?
Está preguntando sobre la situación, por ejemplo,
De la insurgencia.
Sí, de la insurgencia, pues en
She's
relación
asking about La Insurgencia. Okay, as for La Insurgencia, which we defend to in our law study before the Constitutional Court, well, these are 11 young people who had created a platform to do rap. And in the sentence convicting them at the Audiencia Nacional, that sentence describes what rap is. And they say that their rap is bad rap, is not good rap. Is a kind of rap, but not that kind of rap that is expected. So that comes from deep ignorance. The rapporteur of the sentence probably is a lady and she doesn't like rap. So they were convicted to 1 year prison time. And we are now before the Constitutional Court because one of them hired us to do that. And what we claim is for his rights to be respected. We are telling them that they don't know what rap is. They are unable to tell reality apart from a song. And for the same reason that they have been convicted, they could outlaw violent films, and a potential public member could imitate an aggressive or violent character. So this is what courts are using to justify their sentences. It's an abstract risk. They do not bother to define it. And they say that any person listening to a rap concert could be incited or encouraged to commit a terror act. And they do not analyze who is the emitter of the message, who is the artist, which is the target audience, whether the artist has any bond or link to a terror act, and whether the context in Spain has seen a lot of terror acts. Without analyzing the context, we are seeing judges in high courts allowing themselves to criticize, describe, and convict rap. Thank you.
Arnau, la passes?
Sí. Núria, quan vulguis.
Ai, perdona, ara, que el tenia desactivat. Perdoneu.
Okay, now, sorry, I was muted. So I have a question for Pablo Hasel. He said that the government, he reported that there's this inconsistency specifically about Podemos, probably because they were denouncing this as part of their electoral campaign, and then the reality is different. So I would like to ask you if at a personal level, there's any specific politician that has contacted you regarding this. No, personally, I haven't been reached out by any politician from Unidos Podemos who has decided to reach out. And for all of these years that I have been subject to this long-standing repressive procedure, I have never received any support. I think it's quite telling, as Valtonyc was saying, right? He had a song about the monarchy, which is why he was convicted. Whereas, the main leader of the political party, Pablo Iglesias, had commissioned it and never showed any support for this song that he used in his show. So this is a repression of any covert fascist state, which is what I consider Spain to be. And as I was saying earlier, if they decide to withdraw this and release me, it's not going to happen because they believe in it, because they have had time to do this, but because of the pressure of this solidarity movement, because there are a lot of people lobbying and trying to understand that this is a shameful behavior from the government. Thank you. And just one quick second question. Unfortunately, you see yourself going into jail shortly, but this has probably helped you understand the judicial and the political system more in depth about Spain. So I'm not sure if your mindset or how, let's say, you interpreted the state and specific politicians, and whether this has changed, whether you have changed your views after you wrote these lyrics and everything that happened. Well, before I was first arrested in 2011, I was already writing these songs because I was fully aware of what we're going through. So I was using rap as a tool to try to raise awareness amongst people. It is a very powerful tool to help people open their eyes to these harsh realities. But I was never surprised by the level of repression because I was already aware of this absolute lack of democratic liberties in this state. So it wasn't an eye-opener. It just came to prove as evidence of what I already believed. And I wasn't surprised by the consequences. I do not want to live in a state where just because you denounce what a fully anti-democratic institutions like the monarchy is doing, you're sent to jail, or because you protest against police killing. So if the price to be paid when trying to put an end to this anti-democratic system like ours is to go to jail, that's where I'm headed. And if we do not move back against this repression, they're the ones to lose. And I believe that more people will join us, so that there's this massive rejection of this system, which is only representing a minority of repressors. And just one last question. So considering that you respect people who went to exile, but that's not what you're going to do, you said that you want them to come to your home and take you away. What about your musical career? Will you continue composing or singing from jail? Maybe there's a new song coming up. I'm sorry if that's already the case, and I don't know. But what's your intention? I'm going to publish, yes, I will post the song in a matter of days, following along the lines of the same message. When I'm in prison, I won't be able to record songs. I'm not going to be allowed that, obviously, but I won't stop doing this because it's something I need. It's part of who I am. I will keep writing, of course, and I will keep composing. I will write poems and articles and texts and other writings, because based on my own experience, a lot of writings from political prisoners of the time inspired me and helped me choose a revolutionary way of living. So that's what I intend to do. Thank you very much, Pablo. Now, there's Laura as well. Ivan, would you like to say anything?
Yes, please. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, sorry for the delay. There is a envy voting at this moment, so I was following what you were saying, and I must say that I'm shocked with these events embarking in Spain. My home country, Croatia, also has extreme corruption cases, and with these corruption cases, we see how the judiciary system is unfair, how it uses all the tools it has to protect the establishment, to protect the regime. And a few months ago, I found out that actually the Spain today has strong elements from the Francoist regime. The transition was never really completed. And this shocked me really, because we are in the 21st century and we have values, we have human rights, we have freedom of speech, of movements, etc. And we must do everything we can to protect them, and we must speak about this at all times. But Croatia as well never really fully made its transition from the old so-called communist regime to the 21st century. So we also have some extremes in Croatia that are supposed to be an element of the past. We don't have cases like Pablo's. Luckily, we don't have cases like that. We are allowed to think whatever we want. But as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So I'm very glad I was present at this event. And thank you for sharing your information, experiences. And I would like to encourage you to continue doing what you are doing now. And time will prove that the rights we have, are worth fighting for, and that fighting for what you believe is the right way. So thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to listen to these stories, and to share some experiences from Croatia, which has similar problems like Spain.
Thank you very much, Ivan.
Thank you, Clara.
Thank you. Now, queda algú més de la premsa que vulgui preguntar?
Anyone else from the media? Laura? Yes, hello. Just a couple things. I would like to ask Pablo Hasel if he can confirm that this arrest cannot happen over the weekend, so tomorrow. Is that confirmed? And then for both Giuseppe and Pablo, what are the reactions that you found when speaking to other rappers from Europe when you explain what has happened to you? Well, regarding the arrest, theoretically, if they comply with their own legality, because we have seen on numerous occasions that they even failed to comply with it, they need to wait until next Friday, but we cannot rule it out. They can come anytime because, as I said, they don't even fulfill their own legal regulation. So you're not talking about tomorrow, but next week's Friday, right? Yes, next week. And I have spoken with many rappers, not only rappers, I have given talks all across Europe. I've spoken with people in the United States as well, and they are all quite surprised because in their countries, it is unthinkable that a rapper might be arrested. In the US, in France, in many other countries, there are rappers with lyrics that are, let's say, much more of a scandal than ours. There are rappers that are very well known, even Eminem, which is probably the most well-known rapper, and there are songs in which he speaks about killing, assassinating the American president, and his songs are broadcasted in the most important radio stations in the world, and there are songs about murdering Trump or police agents, and nothing's happened to them. So what happens here is a characteristic of one of the most authoritarian countries in the world. And it's very dangerous because people see this as normal, this level of repression. And in other countries, they're not used to that level of strong repression in regarding freedom of expression, which is why it's only natural that people are surprised. Well, given that Pablo spoke about rappers, I'll speak about police agents. And the first time, given that I'm here in Belgium under this parole, because I cannot leave the country, and every 2 or 3 months, the police agents come to my place in order to certify that I'm here, and they extend this parole. The first time, 8 police agents came to my home. And when I saw so many people, I asked, how come 8 people, 8 agents? And he said, no, because on the arrest warrant, they speak about terrorism. So it's a serious crime. And in those cases, well, there has to be a team of 8 police agents. And I said, no, I'm not a terrorist. I just wrote a song. And then I explained the case to the police agents, and they said, what? This is unthinkable. My daughter listens to this kind of music. She speaks about killing police agents, and nothing happened. So an agent himself told me that his daughter was listening to this kind of songs that speak about killing police agents, and it was normal. So it's out of the question in Belgium. As Pablo said, in the US, for instance, Snoop Dogg in his video clip kills Trump. Eminem speaks about assassinating the American president. Even Madonna herself said that she would set a bomb in the White House, or even MG in the Super Bowl in front of 200,000 people. And the judges know this, obviously. These things only happen in dictatorships, sending people to jail for this reason. Thank you very much, Josep. I would like to thank everyone involved, all the different participants, and specifically the 2 young men, our speakers who have shared their story with us. You're an example to many. You're a source of inspiration.
Here today, especially I want to thank Josep and Pablo for their fight. They are an example to all of us who struggle for freedom. Please keep up the good work. And Pablo, especially, we wish you the best in the coming weeks and months. Thank you very much to everybody, and goodbye.
Gracias.